So those who haven't been here the last few weeks, we're starting to do these sermon series where we can really kind of focus in on some practical ways we can start living out our faith. And based on those steps, we used that acronym last week, STEPS, in the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks of what steps can we take to grow in our faith. We're going to continue that now. And the theme of this sermon series is going to have to do with this phrase, you reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. Those little things we do in life, the little habits we form, good or bad, those little by little affect us in our life. I think we all know that. And like we said, these sermon series aren't going to be something new, but just reminding us, the wisdom of our church that's been passed down through the ages. When I thought about this, you reap what you sow, I couldn't help but think about this interview this one world-class famous violin player gave one time, and people were asking him how he was so good. He just effortlessly, seemed to play the violin, and people would come from all over paying a lot of money to watch him. And someone asked him, someone once said, "Well, you're really good, you know that?" And he said, "Oh, I know." And he wasn't being prideful at all because he said he practiced like 12 hours a day. I was like, holy cow. He put the effort into, so he said, it's not by chance that I'm really good. No, I put my whole life, heart, and soul into this. But somebody once asked him and said, well, what would happen if you took a few days off and didn't practice? Would you be any worse, or would you still be as good as you are? And he said, well, if I took a few days off and didn't practice, I'd still be pretty good. But I myself would notice that I was a little bit off. If a day or 2 days, 3 days went by, I would notice something was off. And maybe some really world-class violinists, they would notice I was off my game too. Well, they said, what would happen if you took a week off, or 2 weeks? And he said, well, I would definitely notice I wasn't as good. My friends would. Some of my family members might wonder what's up too. And they kind of continue, so what if I took a month off, or years? And then he said, well, then a lot of people would start to notice. I'd be making mistakes all the time. And basically what he was saying is, his skill of being a great violinist, well, obviously he probably had some natural talent, probably playing since he was 5 years old. But you reap what you sow, the effort we put into living out our faith or whatever, his profession, family time, if you're married, time with your spouse, the effort you put into that or that you don't put into it, really does, those seeds of what we're reaping come to fruit, And obviously, there's some things in our lives that we don't have control of, right? Nature, other people, accidents can happen. And yet, we do have more control than we think, or at least in our own lives. How we can control ourselves, how we respond to things. To really believe, as St. Paul says, it's not just us who's living it anymore, but Christ who lives in us. We're temples of the Holy Spirit. How are we sowing those seeds, or how are we taking care of our own spiritual lives ourselves? There was a reading earlier this week. Those who go to daily mass may remember. Jesus was talking about, or even lamenting of, the fact that people often are really good at knowing how to do worldly things. I mean, we live in the world, obviously. Pretty good. We often are okay, for the most part, with finances or this or that or the other thing. But he said when it comes to spiritual matters, sometimes we're not as good. Why is that? Why is that? This week, we'd really like to, all of us, taking the gospel call seriously today, of all of us, in what ways, kind of reflecting in our own lives, what ways, maybe we're not literally blind, but to be aware of, are we even aware of the different things we do in life? Are we aware of, what effort we're putting in, not just our faith, but do we have some maybe bad habits we want to maybe fix to help our own family life or our faith? In what ways do we really need to ask Jesus, Lord, what ways am I literally blind in my own life? Am I not even aware what's going on around me? How can I be that instrument of your love in my own family? My workplace, this community here at St. Paul's, in my own life? And really asking, the Lord to help us, huh? Asking for that grace. We have so many devotions, like you see that picture of divine mercy over on this side of the wall, and I was reading a book recently, like the Sacred Heart of Jesus. You see his heart on flame with fire. Many of those mystics Jesus was trying to get the people at the time, because many people were not asking him for those graces. Huh? Jesus said, my heart's like on fire with love and mercy, but it's like it's being consumed because nobody's asking me for help. Huh? They're just trying to go about life on their own. Or divine mercy is literally blood and water coming out of his side saying, I want to give people my mercy. People have to ask for it. Huh? They need to ask for my help, but keep asking. Like the blind man, when other people try to tell you to be quiet, or we have challenges, not stop asking. Don't give up. Invite me into your life to let me help you. Brothers and sisters, what ways do maybe we think of at least one way, can we sow better seeds in our own life, whether it's our faith, to try to break a bad habit, to know that Christ died for us, rose from us, and we're trying to break free of a certain, addiction or habit or way of life. Christ wants to help us. Huh? Sometimes it's not, we just want things like right away, right? I wanted it 5 minutes ago, and that's, I don't know, my experience, God doesn't always work that way. God really does respect our free will, though. I think sometimes we're not aware of maybe woundedness in our life or different things that happened in the past that are actually inhibiting us from receiving God's grace. Today in the reading, even though the guy was blind and it was fairly obvious what he needed, Jesus said, well, what can I do for you? What do you want me to do for you? Well, the man said, I want to see. In our own lives, what do we want Jesus to do for us? Maybe we can take the time this week to ask ourselves that question. What do we want Jesus to do for us? And maybe Jesus will answer our prayer and not quite the way we expect. But to really believe Jesus will answer, we keep faithfully from our heart asking it like Bartimaeus, not giving up. Jesus will break into our lives to help us bear those good seeds of faith, hope, and love. So brothers and sisters, I invite you, this week to identify one area of your life you want to start sowing these seeds of the Lord's love, and peace. What area in your life is God inviting you to grow, to truly be that messenger of his love to the whole world?